Good morning, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Monday Merriment. Today is December 2nd, 2024. The moon phase is waxing, and the moon sign is in the void, of course. Later on this afternoon, around 1:09 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the moon sign will be moving into Capricorn, which will be a good time to focus on improving your profession or attracting customers. For now, because it's the void, of course, just take back some time and relax. It's a good time to do some cleaning, just kind of hang out and relax. There's not much to do during the void, of course. Soon we'll be back on track. Yeah, because this is the void, of course, I thought I would just kind of do some talking and sharing some of the things that have been coming through my mind. I've been spending a lot of time in meditation, which isn't really new, okay? But I'm doing a little bit more digging into who I am because I feel as though, my targeting was the main reason why I was targeted is because of who I am or who I was in the past. I had mentioned my time growing up and listening to debates and discussions regarding race and religion. In fact, my entire channel is a story that, began in 2015 of me leaving a place of business because of workplace mobbing, which later on evolved into gang stalking. And then I realized this is more than that. It's human trafficking. We all know, if you have watched my channel, you followed this entire story. Okay. I want to make it very clear that, throughout my channel, I have always talked about my spiritual evolvement. I had mentioned, growing up with me having an innate like need or desire to find out about God, understanding like religion. I had an interest in mysticism. Now, I know that my family, visited like the Baptist church. We went to the Baptist church for a little bit, and then we also, of course, studied with Jehovah's Witnesses. But that was it. And I think mainly my family went to these religious services because they felt a lot of social pressure to do so, not because they felt any sort of need or were drawn to it. Because I will tell you, the things that we discussed in our family, we discussed things like the Bible all the time, but we never like thought that, going to church or something like that was an important thing for our life, okay, as a family, okay? So we were just kind of left to our own devices. Like, nobody pushed us to do these sort of things. So as a child, I came off as rather nerdy because I felt as though that was the most important thing in my life. I felt as though understanding the nature of God, understanding how to connect with God, everything in my life revolved around the divine. Everything. Okay. And so um, throughout my life, I have adopted my life as Maria Gordon. I have adapted certain things that I choose to not participate in. Okay. And one thing that I chose to participate in my life is to be open to the idea of distancing myself from any sort of racial tension, hatred, or anything like that. Now, I will tell you that growing up as Maria Gordon, just as Maria Gordon, okay, that I have experienced nothing but racism. Okay, as a matter of fact, many of the people who participated in targeting me were white people, of course, and would smile in my face, but were working behind my back, mainly due to brainwashing, cold-based mind control. But anyway, um, I have, I remember going back in school. I was thinking that I was a very misunderstood person, mainly because I was developing my relationship with the divine and following my own inner drive and distancing myself from worldly views. Okay. Now, there were a few, growing up in elementary school, there were a few other black kids. but there were very few. We were very few in number. Now, when we first moved to Lancaster in 1974, the entire neighborhood was pretty much white. Okay, and slowly but surely, other black kids started coming to the school system. So I will tell you, there were times where we were just major targets of hatred, but mainly my sisters and my brother and sister, would use me as a scapegoat in order to get along with people. This is one of the issues that targeted individuals deal with. They deal with all kinds of betrayal. Okay, and this is the entire story of my life. Okay, and why? Because I later found out because I was a victim of bloodline targeting. Now, with all the hatred that I've ever received from white people, okay, in my mind, I always get down to the root of the problem. The root of the problem. The why do they act this way? Now, I think I've made it very clear that I am not a racist. I am not somebody who attacks white people. But I do understand that brainwashing, cult mind control played a lot of role in this. Okay. So I remember back in high school, okay, I don't know how this happened, but somebody had written me this note about, Black Pride. Now, I love who I am. And I loved growing up before I knew anything about Prince Alamehu, before I knew anything about my dad being Tut or anything like that, okay? I started having spiritual messages in my mind about detaching from ego, detaching from things that only that can give me pride based on something that is not on a stable foundation. Now, that does not mean that I love my background, meaning like I love my background before I knew I was Prince Alamehu. I grew up believing that James Calvin Gordon was my blood father and that he came from a family of sharecroppers, that we were just dirt poor people who came from a family of sharecroppers, hardworking people. And I really was proud of that. And some people would laugh. Well, you guys were just poor. That's nothing to be proud of. You know what? I was proud of the product that came out of it. My father was an intelligent man. So the story that I believed as Maria Gordon, I was content with. And I was just as proud to tell people that my father was a sharecropper, came from a sharecropper family. I kid you not, because I felt a certain sense of pride of that. Now, whether that people can understand that or not, whatever, but I was content with that. Okay? So I also understood that people, because of ego, people need to see themselves and project themselves into things. And sometimes they get selfish with that. Okay? And so I understand, like, throughout the centuries, racism has played a huge part on the earthly platform. And I also understand that, we can talk about things like, history, the study of eugenics. We can talk about Nazis. We can talk about white nationalism, all of those things, okay? But deep down underneath it all is the need for a feeling of superiority and their need to feel like they have some sort of purpose in life. That's the underlying thing. Now, I think a lot of kids, when I was growing up in high school, were angry with me. I do remember getting into some sort of argument with some black kids at school because somebody had written me this note. I think I wrote a note about how I don't believe in being proud of just because I'm black. Now, don't get me wrong. I love my skin color. But what I was trying to say is that there's a lot of times where I felt as though, black people didn't have my back. Good example, my own family, who believed into this whole Nazi thing and ended up betraying me, abusing me for the purpose of a wicked purpose of a white person or a group of people wanting to create some sort of problem within my family dynamic. Okay? I do know that a lot of the people who hated me and a lot of the people who were wanted to shred me apart, ignore me, and whatever, came from my own race. Okay? So I understand that thinking that people are going to always have your back just because they're the same color as you, to me, made no sense, even back in high school. Okay? Now, I love who I am. Whether I was the sharecropper's father, daughter, or whatever, or I am Prince Elame, who originally came from like wealthy beginnings, even though I'm not wealthy now, but you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, I have a very, I don't know what you would call it. How would you describe it? Um, I understand as a black person, I have dealt with extreme hardships, okay? All because of my race, okay? And I do know that religion was used in this, and we talked about the cult-based mind control. This is not the purpose of this video, okay? So what I wanted to cover in this video was, sorry about that, I got interrupted. Okay, but what I wanted to talk about in this video was, some of the things that I was exposed to growing up, dealing with the discrediting of black people, meaning, I know black history is not taught in the school, and this is not me bringing it up as a debate in any way, shape, or form. I have learned to distance myself from what the majority does, okay? Mainly because I disagreed with how things were for a very long time. And because of my feeling about it, I've chosen never to create any sort of stir. And the only reason why I talk about my personal beliefs now is because of my targeting. I wanted to get down to the root of what exactly did people have against me all of these years. Because I was just completely flabbergasted when I found out that I was a targeted individual. But so I wanted to get down to the root of it. Now, the root of it is, of course, race. And, of course, the religion was used in this, okay? But I did find out that this is deeper than what I thought it was. Because initially I thought I was just being bullied by, family members and kids that I knew growing up in school. So white supremacy has always been, a big part of the issue of the United States as well as the rest of the world, okay? And that's nothing new. I'm not fazed by it. I've never tried to protest or anything. I just kind of lived my life kind of quietly, and then I, became like this, it became very blown up in the last few years. But I have always grew up dealing with, racist remarks, snide comments, subtle put downs, if I had a plan or something, people would try to discourage me or, talk negatively about black people in general. I've known, like, in movies or whatever, black people were always depicted as either slaves, maids, or whatever. So I understood that, there were accomplishments that black people did, but were not talked about. And I understand that because of white supremacy, black people were institutionally made to feel, or tried to make people feel inferior. Like the need to make black people feel inferior. This is not me creating an argument. It is what it is, okay? And I think that my targeting kind of proved that. Okay, so I'm going to be discussing how black people or black people in general, okay, have been whitewashed through society. White people felt very threatened by associating black people with intelligence. Okay, I know growing up, people would try to downplay my intelligence, and that happens. Okay, as an adult, people just really went out of their way to do that. I think I had mentioned that I was thought of and spoken of as an artist because they wanted to discredit me. Okay. Now, in the next few slides, I'm going to be showing certain individuals that you probably recognize. Okay. And you might debate among yourself or maybe think about, whether these people were black or not. Okay. And in my mind, I've known it, or in my mind, or I should say, in my memory. Okay. I remember discussing these people in my household with my family and talking about and hearing these sort of conversations, which I call barbershop talk or beauty shop talk, where people would get together and talk about, what they really felt was going on. Meaning, like, uh, certain individuals who were passing for white, meaning like people who looked white but were big historical figures that people assumed were white but were hiding their black identity. So, anyway, I'm going to show you a couple pictures and you guys can debate and talk about this yourself. My point of it was when I was listening, when I grew up and heard these people, is I understand, going back to ego, people want to see themselves as great, okay? So a lot of times, people will, like I said, the disassociation of the word intelligent for black people was always like a taboo thing. People didn't want to do it because they felt threatened by it, okay? So a lot of times they would take an accomplishment of a black person and attribute it to a white person, or change the image of a person entirely. The one-drop rule was a legal principle of racial classification that was prominent in the 20th century United States. It asserted that any person with even just one black ancestor was going to be considered black. J. Edgar Hoover. Man, I had a hard time saying that. Anyway, he was someone who went hard against the civil rights movement, but he was part black. He was very light-skinned, and early in his life, his family went through great lengths to hide that part of his heritage. According to what I've read, DNA analysis and genealogical research has backed up the claim that he was indeed part black himself. While he was alive, many people questioned his heritage. Another prominent figure that most people would assume was white, but was actually would be considered black based on the one-drop rule, would be Alexandre Dumas. Now, he wrote several memorable books, but he's best known for The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers. In the story of The Count of Monte Cristo, it's about a man who is in prison for years after being wrongly accused of a crime. Now, once he gains his freedom, he hides his identity by pretending to be an Italian count. Andre Dumas was a biracial man of black and French ancestry. Ludwig van Beethoven. Now, this is a person who's been depicted as white on pictures, paintings, and on what they call like bust sculptures. There's written accounts of him while he was alive, and most of the people who described him as dark and swarthy. Okay, this topic has been widely debated, and my suspicion is it's because it's based on racism and ignorance. Beethoven was rumored to use a lot of white facial powder, which was very common in Europe at that time, not just for black people, but for white people. I don't know what the whole thing was, but people powdered themselves. I think mainly it was for fragrant purposes, but he used a lot of it, and it was believed he did it because he wanted to lighten his complexion. Like I said, throughout history, people have always wanted to attack black people, so he probably did it to, maybe make himself a little bit lighter in appearance. Now, it has been rumored, okay, that he used body doubles, and he used body doubles to take pictures for him so that he could hide his black identity. And what I mean by taking pictures, obviously they didn't have cameras back then, but he would have a stand-in person who would sit and get painted and then be identified as Beethoven. Okay. Anyway, so on the left-hand side, we have the traditional picture that we're used to seeing in history books and in museums of a white Beethoven. And on the right-hand side is what he most likely probably looked like. Now, I remember growing up in school, kids would laugh, and make fun of me or black people in general, like if you believed in something different than they did. Like, for example, I always believed that Beethoven was black. I always considered him black. And I remember it would always like evolve into some sort of argument. And as an adult, I refuse to argue about that kind of stuff because I have come to be at peace with who I am and how I see myself and how I see the world. Okay, so I literally let people argue among themselves. I literally don't care, because the way I look at it is that I don't need to live through other people. Whether it's Beethoven and what he created in his greatness, that's his accomplishment. It's not mine. You see what I'm saying? As an individual, I do not need to hide behind the works of other people. Okay? But I do remember kids getting really nitpicky and just really wanting to bully, right? When I was growing up, and I find my images online, and when I like want to describe something, I type it in, and then these images come up, and I select, the best image. Okay? Now, back in the 70s, we had something similar to this particular Santa Claus, but our Santa Claus figure that my mom had was a black Santa, but it was made out of these plastic piece holes. It looked like, you take like a hole puncher and punch out these little holes, and they did this with plastic, and then they would melt them together. Well, we had something similar to this one, except for our Santa Claus was black, right? And of course, you get these little kids with their little snide remarks, Santa Claus isn't black. I'm going to tell you right now, of course Santa Claus is black, because my parents were footing the bill for all those presents that we're putting in under the Christmas tree. As an adult, I refuse to engage in such stupid arguments, right? But don't get me wrong, people would sit here and bring that kind of stuff up. But I do think it's interesting to know that when I look at historical pictures of this particular person who inspired the creation of Santa Claus, because many times Saint Nicholas, or what we know of as Saint Nick, also known as like Santa Claus, okay? Saint Nicholas has been depicted as black, okay? He is also depicted as white as well, but there's black depictions of him, which makes me wonder, perhaps there really was a black Santa Claus. And like I said, the things that I'm talking about and the people that I'm bringing up, people are always going to debate as to whether or not these people are black or whether they're white or whatever, okay? And then, like I said, in my mind, it really doesn't matter, okay? But it's interesting to know anyway. Okay, the next person I'm going to show is Sister Rosetta Tharpe. Now, she was someone who inspired a lot of great people in rock and roll, the rock and roll musicians, such as Little Richard, Johnny Cash, Carl Perkins, Chuck Berry, and even Elvis Presley. Okay, she was a recording, started off doing gospel music, and people really took to her. So she appealed to people who were interested in rhythm and blues, as well, of course, as rock and roll audiences. Now, people have removed merit from her, because most of the people who are fans of the people that I mentioned, these older people that maybe not are well heard of in this generation, but inspired a lot of great rock and roll artists that are still remembered today. When you are a person of color, you can expect people to remove merit from what you do and attribute it to them. Now, a lot of the people have taken or were inspired by her style, but like never really gave her any full recognition. King Solomon is a highly honored and respected figure in Christianity as well as Islam. In the New Testament, he is portrayed as a teacher of wisdom, and he is known as a magician as well as an exorcist. King Solomon, like many other historical figures, has been whitewashed. King Solomon was the fourth monarch of the Kingdom of Israel and Judah. In the Bible, King Solomon is mostly known for his wisdom. In 1 Kings, he sacrificed to God, and God later appeared to him in a dream and asked Solomon what he wanted. And Solomon asked for wisdom so that he could lead his people. And God was pleased with Solomon and granted him wisdom because he did not ask for anything that was self-serving. The best known story of Solomon is the Judgments of Solomon, which is a story from the Hebrew Bible, which tells of Solomon ruling between two women who claimed to be the mother of a child. And being a mother of a child at that time was pretty much how women were identified. That was basically their purpose and their only purpose. So you can kind of think of it as a child being a status symbol in some ways. So the woman who was not the real mother of the child wanted the child so she could fit in or whatever. Okay, so they take the child to Solomon, and Solomon says, well, we will divide the child in half, and you guys can have each have a half of the child. The real mother cried out because of her compassion and, of course, love for her child. At that moment, King Solomon identified her as the real mother, because the other woman basically just wanted the child for her own selfish purposes. She could care less if, the baby was going to be killed or not. According to a biblical account, Solomon had about 700 wives and about 300 concubines. Now, back in the Old Testament days, people did practice polygamy. That was kind of considered the norm. Now, monogamy, or, being solidified with just one spouse was something that came during Jesus's time. But anyway, it was very common to have more than one wife. And Solomon had basically a huge kingdom. He basically had a lot of family members to take care of, and he did build. He constructed like a temple, and he had a quite comfortable living arrangements. He was somebody who could generate a lot of wealth, okay, and which of course caused a lot of envy and among a lot of people. The biblical narrative talks about King Solomon having several foreign wives, and people get stuck or comfortable with their tradition. So people were not happy with him having different wives who were bringing in some of their customs that were different than what they were used to. So I keep saying Simon. His name is Solomon, okay? King Solomon, basically never fell out of favor with God. What happened is that he fell out of favor with certain people. And this is what caused a lot of the division when it comes to King Solomon and how people saw him throughout history. Because King Solomon did not limit himself into the vision of just focusing on one way of getting to certain levels of consciousness. He was open and understanding that, other people had different ways of tapping into those sort of sources. And like I said, this was something that made the people around him uncomfortable. Much like me as Maria Gordon. Now, I'm somebody who moved to Bakersfield. Like I said, my targeting goes back way, 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 way back, okay? And I'm not somebody who goes around and advertises that I am somebody who is open to various forms of the occult. But apparently people were attacking me based on my religious views. And I wasn't even doing anything. Okay, why? Because people want things to be their way. When it comes to things relating to God, people have historically wanted to believe that God was on their side, right? So they try to bully other people, right? Because it all comes down to how they view themselves, okay? And the same thing that happened to me as Maria Gordon was probably even worse to King Solomon, because he had wealth. He had a lot of things that real kings, all right, royalty, possessions and stuff like that he had. Now, I also find it interesting that King Solomon did enjoy objects and stuff like this. And part of my targeting was, I know people talked about my clothes, okay, and then also talked about my art and everything else, okay. Same thing, because they didn't understand it, they wanted to demonize it, right? But in fact, what Solomon understood is that these are traditions of men. Some people think that you can only see God one way, and they're adamant about it, and they get upset if you see something different than they do. because it makes them feel uncomfortable. It always comes down to the individual themselves. So Solomon had a broader mind than that. He understood the universal knowledge that everything was just basically one. And that's a simplified answer, okay? Because when we think about things relating to God, it's even deeper than that, okay? But that's just the easiest way that I can explain it. So Solomon never fell out of favor with the divine, okay? But he did fall out of favor with people who were around him, okay? Because they didn't understand it and were not open to hearing anything that he had to say, and he was fine with that. You know what I mean? I don't believe that he was somebody who tried to enforce his view on other people, okay? And as Maria Gordon, I don't try to force my view on other people, but I do exercise my right to see things the way that I want to see them. Anyway, King Solomon did have several wives, and he had several concubines, and many of these women were foreign, and then they did bring in their customs, and he never opposed that. He was open to them continuing doing the things that they were used to. He did solidify a political alliance with Egypt by marrying a pharaoh's daughter. Okay, so throughout my channel, like I had discussed, I realized I was a victim of gang stalking and human trafficking and all that stuff. Then I came to find out that I was Prince Alamehu. And then I came to understand that my father was a clone of King Tut, and which led me to understand that I was once married to King Tut. So I understood that was another past life I had discovered. And I know that Prince Alamehu and CB Berganza are basically, they're all the same person, but CB Berganza was still Prince Alamehu in disguise, basically, coming here to the United States. But what the real origins of who I am coming to understand or believe that I am King Solomon. And I have come back several times as Prince Alamehu, as, King Tut's wife, or whatever. Okay? I was a little reluctant to say that I believe that I was King Solomon, but I do believe now more and more that I am King Solomon. And what happens is during the cloning process, you continually come back, and the strengths that you have just continue on in the next life. One of the things that C.B. Berganza was noted for was his interest in the occult, right? And his influence on, the religious movements of that time. The same thing with King Solomon. So this is the cloning process. You're just constantly being brought back over and over and over again. Okay? Yeah, I fully do believe that I am King Solomon. And the thing is that I was always a little bit uncomfortable talking about reincarnation in the past, before I was even had an understanding of Prince Alamehu or anything like that, because it's a very, it was considered controversial. And throughout the years of me discovering, the occult, working with the occult, I learned at a young age that discussing any sort of religious view openly or whatever made people uncomfortable. So I've always just kind of kept to myself about this whole thing. And I still kind of feel that way too. Like, I don't go out and try to convert people or anything like that. Okay, I talk about it on my channel because I would say that my understanding of occult knowledge is a big important part of my life. I would say it's the main thing in my life. Okay. I have never taken credit for the weird, mysterious miracles that have come into my life. I have always given credit to the divine. I have always given credit to the divine. And I do understand that me as being King Solomon and coming back in many different incarnations, I have been given the same gifts over and over and over again. And I'm grateful for it. And I basically just wanted to share this information with you because I have been getting so many different downloads. I also wanted to talk about I understand that talking about things relating to God has always been a very touchy subject, mainly because it all comes down to ego. It all comes down to ego, okay? That is not because I am someone who's considered to be, I'm going to tell you this. I have been loved by the divine, protected by the divine, and had a friendship with the divine in every single life I have lived. Every single life I have lived. Even Maria Gordon. I do understand that my attacks were of religious nature. Why? Because of people wanted to blame me for not being a part of the religious movement. And when I was just quietly living my life, okay? And this is not an argument, but I'm just kind of clarifying some things and how I feel, okay? I understand that people are going to be comfortable with how they view things like God or whatever, and I've always left it up to them. Okay, I've never tried to like tell people or force my views on people. Okay, but this is who I am, and this is what I'm comfortable with. I loved my father, and I loved my background when I believed that I was just the the offspring of a very humble background, a very humble, simple, what do you want to call it, pedigree, if you want to even call it that. I've always felt that way. I've never tried to hide behind the accomplishments or feel as though I needed a black person to accomplish something so that I could feel good about myself. I've never lived vicariously through anyone. And that was my philosophy when I believed that I was the granddaughter of a sharecropper. And I still feel the same thing to this very day. To this very day. It just, me coming to understand, me being King Solomon, just explains why I am the way that I am, why I was targeted. And this was a bloodline targeting thing. And I believe that some people who took the scriptures or the what I want to call the devil's playbook, because I also thought it's important to mention that Solomon did contribute to some of the writings in the Bible, okay? And I do understand that this was some sort of devil's playbook or some sort of, I am not somebody who is interested in arguing religion, but I will say that, my views on how to reach levels of consciousness and my universal view on connecting to the divine may not be understood by everyone, but when we really think about it, most people do see God in their own way, even if they do attend a particular church or whatever. Like, because God is known to be something all-knowing, some people in their mind, they conjure up this image of like a big eyeball or a bunch of eyeballs or a bunch of ears. Okay, why? Because this is what they associate with as a being who is aware constantly. And the same person who goes to the same church might have may not even make any sense to them. Everybody is going to see God in their own way. You know what I mean? And so the thing is that, when it comes to tradition, that is exactly what it is. It is people become used to the things that they want to because of the need to have pride. Okay, because this all comes down to ego, people have always wanted things specifically their way. I just recently had a comment that I kind of ignored it. It was left on one of my videos, and they started talking about what I got from this message was somebody who was trying to find comfort in their belief system, and they wanted me to endorse their belief system, and even though I have my own. And it's not a matter of right or wrong, but the comment that I got, or the impression that I got from this was somebody being insecure, wanting me to feel bad about what I believe because they wanted to feel good. I'm not here for that. I'm not here to sit here and try to make people feel good about their beliefs. I'm going to tell you something, okay? However God appears to you in your mind, however you're able to understand and connect to it, that's what you need to be satisfied with, okay? I don't believe that limiting my view or my connection to adhere to a specific tradition really doesn't do anything good for anyone. You know what I mean? As somebody who is always able to step outside the box, I do believe that that has given me uh, divine favor with the divine. It is what it is. And because, like I said, people didn't understand that, they always want to attack me. Okay, as an individual, when it comes down to our spirit is infinite. It goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, you know? And I understand that, you know? And I understand that when it comes to my purpose here on life, my purpose in life is basically my purpose in life on a spiritual level is to only connect to the divine to the day that I die. Okay, and I will always, even in spirit form, always going to be connected to the divine. That is the only thing that is important to me in this life. Everything else, tradition of men that have established their version of how to connect to God, that's their version. And they have the right to pursue that version. Okay, but this is the only thing that I ever wanted. Okay, what I have is true spirituality. True spirituality, true connection, uninhibited. Okay, it is not based or limited on a tradition of men. There's a scripture in the Bible, and it says, I can't remember, I mean, I'll look it up. It's called. It was basically saying that I am not the lover of traditions of men, meaning that just because a person is used to certain traditions that they have, like for example, some people have certain clothing traditions, like Scottish people like their plaids, right? Or Indian people like their beautiful saris or whatever. Okay, those are we cherish these as individuals. Okay, and we have our customs and we have our observances that mean a lot to people. Okay, and that's nice. That's wonderful. Okay, but do they have any significance to the divine? You can have them, but he has no, or he, or I don't like to say he or she. I just say the divine has no need for the things that are so simple and trivial. Okay? So, anyway, I've come to accept the fact that I am King Solomon. And, but as far as, I think people were threatened because King Solomon is a very powerful figure, and I, as a black woman, made a lot of people feel uncomfortable. I'm not here to get involved with worldly affairs. I'm here to avoid all of that as much as possible. I just live my life and stay close to the divine. That's it. So anyway, let's get on with the um, week's synchronistic symbol. Last week's synchronistic symbol was a pair of dice. This week's synchronistic symbol is a blue octopus. Keep your eyes peeled for it. It could be an actual blue octopus. It could be a stuffed version of a blue octopus. It could be a picture, a billboard, whatever. Keep your eyes peeled for the blue octopus. Well, I'm about to wrap this video up. I just wanted to show you this picture I took of my Cabby doll with this little small pumpkin pie that I got, just to give you a little update on what's going on in my life. I had mentioned that someone donated a vehicle to me, and right now the vehicle is kind of down right now. So I've been taking an Uber to work, which, because my vehicle is in need of repair, I could not really make it to the store to get those last minute Thanksgiving type things. So we didn't end up having a turkey this year, but you know what? It is what it is. But at least we did prepare, a decent meal, and we had, some good food that we ate. I got this tiny little pumpkin pie at Walmart, and I thought, hey, this is just the size for my doll. I just thought it was so cute. I wanted to take a picture and share it with you guys. Okay, so I'm wrapping this one up. I hope you guys all have a great week. Keep your eye on the blue octopus, and I'll be back with you another video next week. Take care. Bye-bye.